I know my life doesn't look like a Christian's life should look, but I believe in God. Have you ever heard that? I know a lot of pastors around our country today have heard that. I know my life doesn't look like a Christian life should, but I do believe in God. Welcome to Christian atheism, where people believe in God but live as if God doesn't exist. And as much as I don't want to admit it, I see this kind of atheism in myself as well. There has to be a better way to live. And that's what we're about in our 8-part sermon series. This is the first in the 8-part series, which is the Christian atheist believing in God, but living as if God doesn't exist. And I need to say this series is for anyone courageous enough to admit their hypocrisy and who's willing to grow in faith, to look for a better way to live. I want to thank Craig Groeschel, who is the founder and senior pastor of Life Church TV in Edmond, Oklahoma. This is a church with 13 locations in 6 states. Craig has written the book, The Christian Atheist, Believing in God and Living as If He Doesn't Exist. And we've got copies of that book for $20 on the table in the back if you'd like to take that home with you. A recent Gallup poll reported that 94% of Americans claim to believe in God or a universal spirit. But a quick glance around us in America makes it obvious that nowhere near 94% actually know God. You see, believing in God and actually knowing God are not the same thing. The very idea of knowing God for some folks is outrageous. You know, the fact that you can know God. It's unrealistic for others, and it's unlikely to many. But for those willing to consider knowing God, there are at least 4 levels of knowing God, as I see it. Now, I'm assuming that when I say Rick Warren, you know who I'm talking about, right? Everybody familiar with? Some of you are not familiar with. Well, I know Rick Warren. I've read most of the books that he's written. I've read and agree pretty much with his approach to the 5 Goliaths that need to be defeated in order for there to be peace on earth. I've seen him on TV. I follow him on Twitter. He was supposed to show up at a conference in California that I was at 3 years ago so that we could catch up, but he had a family emergency. But if you were to ask Rick Warren about his good friend Dave Esche, he would say, "Who? Who?" And it'd be obvious that I don't really know him. I know him by reputation, okay? My knowledge is secondhand. I know about Rick Warren. I don't know Rick Warren. That really is the first level of knowledge. Reputation, reputational knowledge. We may know about God. We may know about God, but you know, it's not like we're Buddhists or anything. Reputational level of knowledge. There's a second level that I could illustrate by telling you about a friend I connected with on Facebook 9 months ago, a close friend from high school. We hung out a lot together. We took classes together. We were in the band together. We dated the same girl off and on together. His name also happened to be Dave. Just over 40 years ago, we knew each other well. I knew him years ago, but I can't say I know him now. The guy that I see on Facebook now 40 years later is a great deal different than he was 40 years ago. We know by reminiscence. It's not secondhand, but we sort of know in the past. You know, maybe we sort of know God in this way. Perhaps sometime we connected in the past with God, maybe at a church camp or in Sunday school or in a youth group meeting. Maybe once we felt close to God. Well, maybe we have a basic understanding of God, but we don't know God well today. That's a reminiscence level of knowledge. A little bit closer, but still pretty far away. Some of us think we know God in the present. Okay? Not just in the past, but in the present. You know, we come to church, we get involved, we follow the rules that the church tells us to follow. We live by the rules. We think we get stars for attending church, for doing what we're supposed to do. This is the function of religion, after all, to provide institutions and structures for our security and for our control. Let me illustrate. Just because you know the rules of the road doesn't mean you have a knowledge of your car, or it doesn't mean you know how to drive, just because you know the rules of the road. Just because you think you know the rules that God has doesn't necessarily mean you know God. Though it may be in the present, it's a derivative kind of knowledge. It's an indirect knowledge of the God that lies behind the rules. Now, yes, God cares about how we live. And a relationship with God will usually produce a positive lifestyle of daily attitudes and actions that please God, but the reverse isn't true. If you try to live the way God expects, it doesn't necessarily produce the knowledge of God in reverse. Our outward actions, in other words, don't prove that we enjoy an inward relationship with God. Just because we may do good doesn't mean we know the God who is good. God is interested not only in our actions, but also in our hearts. Some of us think we get a star for going to church, or for being nice, or for giving money to charity. Some of us try to earn God's acceptance by following the rules without knowing God's heart. Okay? So we've got reputational knowledge, we've got reminiscence knowledge, we've got rule knowledge.